Hello, this is our Voice Stories channel. It all started with a single sentence that shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. During a heated family argument, my girlfriend's mother suddenly screamed, "Tell him the baby might not be his." The room fell silent. I remember just standing there, frozen, staring at my girlfriend in disbelief. The next day, my lawyer had a DNA test kit delivered straight to her apartment. Now she's been calling me nonstop, crying hysterically, refusing to take it. I'm 29 years old, and until that night, I thought I'd already experienced betrayal in my life. Turns out, I had no idea what real betrayal felt like. Until last Tuesday. The evening had begun like any other. We were at her parents' house for dinner, something we'd done dozens of times before. We'd been together for 3 years, and she was 6 months pregnant with what I truly believed was our first child. Her family was known for being dramatic, but nothing could have prepared me for the chaos that unfolded that night. The fight started over something minor, wedding planning. Her mom had strong opinions about the venue, her dad disagreed about the budget, and my girlfriend ended up caught right in the middle of it. Voices rose quickly. Within minutes, I found myself watching a full-blown family meltdown, the kind that makes you reevaluate everything you thought you knew about the people sitting across the table from you. Her mother's face was flushed red with anger as she waved her hands in frustration. Her father stood stiffly, arms folded, exuding silent disapproval. My girlfriend sat between them, tears streaming down her face, looking completely helpless. I tried to stay calm, to defuse the situation. I suggested we all take a break, breathe, and come back to it later. But my attempt at peacekeeping only seemed to pour gasoline on the fire. Then her mother completely lost control. She turned toward me with eyes full of rage. And something else, something that looked like desperation. Then she shouted the words that would burn themselves into my memory forever. "The baby might not be yours." Silence fell like a physical blow. Even the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner seemed to stop. I felt my stomach drop as her words sank in. My girlfriend's face went pale as paper. Her father's jaw hung open. Her mother's expression changed instantly from fury to horror as she realized what she'd just revealed. I looked at my girlfriend. She wasn't denying it. She wasn't saying anything. She just sat there, frozen, guilt painted across every inch of her face. My throat went dry as I asked if it was true. My voice came out barely above a whisper. She couldn't meet my eyes. Instead, she stared down at her trembling hands and muttered that we needed to talk later. Her mother immediately started backtracking, saying she'd spoken in anger and hadn't meant what she said. Her father demanded to know what was going on. But I was already standing, keys in hand, heart pounding, heading for the door. She followed me outside, begging me to listen, to let her explain. She said it was complicated, that during a rough patch 8 months ago, there had been someone else. She swore it was brief, that she'd ended it quickly, and that she was almost certain the baby was mine. Almost certain. That phrase kept echoing in my mind as I drove home in a daze. My thoughts raced through every moment of our relationship, every conversation, every odd behavior, every red flag I'd brushed aside. The rough patch she mentioned had been a 2-week breakup after a fight about moving in together. I thought we'd both taken time apart to think things through. Apparently, she'd taken the time to sleep with someone else. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake replaying every detail of the life we'd built, or thought we'd built. The nursery we'd been decorating. The baby names we'd chosen together. The future I'd imagined. Was any of it real? Or had I been living a lie this entire time? By morning, I knew what I had to do. I called my lawyer, the same one who'd handled a property dispute for me 2 years earlier. He was reliable, discreet, and brutally honest. I explained the situation and asked what my options were. He didn't sugarcoat it. The only way to know for sure was a paternity test. And given the timeline, he advised arranging a prenatal DNA test before the baby was born. It was safe for both mother and child, he said. All it required was a simple blood sample from her and a cheek swab from me. He offered to manage everything quietly and have the kit couriered to her along with a formal letter explaining the legal necessity. I agreed without hesitation. I needed the truth. I couldn't keep relying on half answers and emotional manipulation. The courier delivered the kit to her apartment the next afternoon. I knew exactly when it arrived because she called me 17 minutes later, sobbing, panicking, and furious. She accused me of blindsiding her, of betraying her trust, of turning our private pain into public drama by involving lawyers. She said the test wasn't needed because she knew the baby was mine. I asked her how she could be so sure, given that she'd admitted to sleeping with someone else during the same time period. She went quiet, then started crying again. She told me she'd made a terrible mistake, but insisted it didn't change how she felt about me. She begged me to reconsider, saying that going through with the test would ruin whatever remained of our relationship. But in my mind, that relationship had already been destroyed the moment her mother's words hit the air, and the moment she didn't deny them. That night, she called again, this time not crying but seething. She accused me of humiliating her, of making her family hate me. She demanded I call off the test and trust her like I used to, but trust has to be earned, and she'd shattered mine. I told her the test wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. If the baby was mine, I'd be there every step of the way. If it wasn't, I needed to know before my life got tied to a lie. She hung up without another word. Update 1. It's been a week since the courier delivered the DNA test kit, and things have spiraled in ways I never saw coming. She's flat out refusing to take the test. Every time I ask why, her excuse changes. First, she said it was about trust. Then she claimed it might cause unnecessary stress for the baby. Now she's insisting it's an invasion of her privacy. Meanwhile, her entire family has closed ranks around her, painting me as the villain who's punishing a pregnant woman. Her mother, the same woman who exposed everything in the first place, is suddenly portraying me as paranoid, controlling, and cruel. My lawyer advised me to keep my distance and document everything. Every phone call, every message, every shifting excuse. He told me that if this ended up in court, I'd need proof that I'd acted reasonably and that she'd refused cooperation at every turn. Legally, I couldn't force her to take a prenatal test, but once the baby was born, I could demand one through the courts. Until then, all I could do was wait and keep records. Still, I couldn't just sit around doing nothing. My gut told me there was more she wasn't saying. So, against my better judgment, I started digging. It felt wrong. Snooping, researching, replaying old memories, but I needed clarity. I started thinking back to that rough patch 8 months ago, the same period she mentioned during her tearful confession. Back then, she used to talk about a coworker from her marketing department, a guy who was helping her with a big campaign. She'd mentioned him often, too often. There were nights she'd worked late, claiming the project was high pressure and had strict deadlines. After our brief breakup, she stopped mentioning him entirely. When we got back together, she told me that the project had wrapped up and she'd been reassigned. At the time, I didn't question it. But now, with everything I knew, the pieces started fitting together in a way I didn't like. I looked him up online. His profile popped up immediately, attractive, fit, single, and judging by his posts, exactly the type of guy she used to go for before she met me. Scrolling through his social media, one image stopped me cold. A company happy hour from 8 months ago. He was front and center, grinning with a drink in his hand. And in the background, there she was, my girlfriend, standing close beside him, closer than coworkers normally would. My stomach twisted as I stared at the picture. It was the confirmation I didn't want but somehow expected. My instincts had been right all along. That weekend, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. She looked wrecked, tired, pale, eyes red from crying. She sat down on the same couch where, just weeks earlier, we'd been discussing baby names and paint colors for the nursery. She said we needed to talk because everything had gotten out of control. That's when she finally told me the truth. The whole truth. During our breakup, she'd gone out drinking with her coworkers and ended up sleeping with that guy from marketing. Not once, but twice over the course of a single week. Afterward, she'd realized she'd made a mistake, ended it, and tried to move on. When we reconciled, she convinced herself that it didn't matter because it was over. Then she found out she was pregnant. When she did the math, she realized the timeline didn't add up cleanly. She'd hoped, desperately, that the baby was mine, and she decided to say nothing. She planned to wait and see if the baby's features made things obvious. I sat there, numb as she confessed. When I asked why she hadn't told me the truth from the start, she said she'd been scared. Scared of losing me. Scared of losing the future she'd imagined. So she gambled. She gambled with my life, my trust, and my future, betting that I'd never find out. I told her that was exactly the problem. She treated honesty like a risk instead of a requirement. Even if the baby was mine, the deceit had already destroyed everything between us. Trust doesn't survive lies of that scale. She broke down sobbing, promising she'd do anything to fix it. She said she'd take the DNA test if it would save our relationship. But for me, the damage was irreversible. I told her to take the test, not to win me back, but because we both needed closure. If the baby turned out to be mine, I'd be there as a father. I wouldn't abandon my child. But I couldn't build a marriage with someone who'd betrayed me so easily. If the baby wasn't mine, at least we'd both know the truth. She cried for a long time before finally agreeing. Then she left my apartment, devastated, clutching the test kit in her hand. 3 days later, the results came in. Update 2. My lawyer received the paternity report in a sealed envelope. I sat in his office for what felt like hours, staring at that envelope before finally asking him to open it. The baby wasn't mine. The words were cold and clinical, no emotional cushioning, no ambiguity. Just scientific certainty. I felt a tidal wave of conflicting emotions. Relief that I wouldn't be bound to a woman who'd lied to me. Grief for the baby I'd already started to love. Anger at months of deceit. And beneath it all, an unfamiliar sense of peace. My lawyer walked me through the legal side. Since we weren't married and the child wasn't biologically mine, I had no financial or parental obligations. He recommended that I keep documentation of everything, just in case she tried to make claims later, but otherwise I was free to move on. I called her that afternoon. She wanted to meet in person, saying she deserved to hear it face to face. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a small coffee shop halfway between our apartments, neutral territory, no memories attached. When she arrived, she looked exhausted, eyes swollen from crying. I told her straight. The baby wasn't mine. She didn't look surprised. She just nodded, tears welling up, and asked what this meant for us. I told her it meant exactly what she already knew. It was over. Completely. She asked if I wanted to know who the real father was. I told her no. That wasn't my problem anymore. I wished her well with the pregnancy and her future, but I made it clear we would not be in contact again. She tried to argue that we could still make it work, that love was enough to overcome anything. But love without trust is hollow, and her months of deception proved she didn't value honesty. I left her sitting there at that coffee shop and walked out into the cold air, feeling lighter than I had in months. Update 3. 6 weeks later, life looks completely different. She told the real father about the test results. From what I've heard through mutual friends, he initially denied it, claimed it had been casual, said he couldn't be sure. But once she showed him the proof, he had no choice but to face reality. He's now apparently agreed to co-parent and provide financial support. She's moved back in with her parents to save money and prepare for motherhood. Her mother, the same woman who detonated this entire situation, was now playing the part of the supportive grandmother-to-be. As for me, I've been rebuilding. I reconnected with friends I'd drifted away from during our relationship. It's amazing how much time and mental space open up when you're no longer living under constant emotional strain. I've started going to the gym again, picked up hobbies I'd abandoned, and focused on rebuilding my life instead of the one I'd been trapped in. And, unexpectedly, I met someone new, a friend of a friend. We'd crossed paths a few times at gatherings but had never really talked before. She's funny, confident, and refreshingly straightforward. No games, no mixed signals. We've gone on a few dates, and while it's early, it feels different. Honest. Easy. The biggest lesson I've learned from all this? Always trust your instincts. There had been red flags, small inconsistencies, subtle defensiveness, behavioral shifts I'd ignored because I didn't want to believe she'd betray me. I won't make that mistake again. She's reached out a few times since the breakup. Late-night texts, emotional messages about missing me, about wishing things had gone differently, about wanting to stay friends. I stopped replying after the third one. There was nothing left to say. Her father called once to apologize for his wife's outburst, saying he hoped there were no hard feelings. I was polite to her father, but firm. I told him I didn't hold any grudges. Yet there was no reason for continued contact. The past was done, and keeping a connection would only reopen old wounds. A few days later, her mother messaged me on Facebook, claiming she'd never meant for things to go that far, insisting she'd just spoken in anger. I didn't reply. I simply deleted the message. The truth is, I was grateful for that outburst. Her mother's impulsive scream, The one that ripped open all the lies had ultimately saved me. If she hadn't blurted out those words during that dinner, I might have spent years raising another man's child, completely unaware. I might have built an entire future on a foundation of deception. Her anger, as destructive as it seemed in the moment, had set me free. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about truth. It's strange how far people will go to avoid it, even when facing it is the only way to find peace. My ex had chosen deceit because it was easier, felt safer, less painful. But that choice destroyed everything she'd claimed to want to protect. I, on the other hand, chose to demand truth even when it hurt, and that decision, as brutal as it was, led me to a better life than the one I'd been clinging to. The baby's due date is about 10 weeks away now. Sometimes I catch myself wondering how she's doing. If she's scared, if the real father's stepping up, if her family's still circling around her. But those thoughts come less and less often. When they do, they feel distant, like idle curiosity instead of heartache. I started seeing a therapist after everything unfolded. The trust issues ran deeper than I'd realized. She helped me understand that asking for a DNA test wasn't cruel or paranoid. It was logical. When someone lies to you about something so fundamental, you have a right to protect yourself. My therapist also taught me the difference between healthy skepticism and toxic suspicion. That distinction mattered more than I expected. The woman I've been seeing knows the entire story. I told her early on because I didn't want any secrets between us. I wanted honesty from the start. Her reaction was the exact opposite of what I feared. She said she admired how I'd handled everything, that demanding truth and refusing to live in denial wasn't weakness, but strength. She called it attractive, even brave. Looking back now, I realized the hardest part of this entire ordeal wasn't learning that the baby wasn't mine. It was the uncertainty that came before, the endless weeks of doubt, the slow erosion of trust, the quiet fear that I was losing something I couldn't name. Living in that fog was worse than facing the truth. Once I had the truth, even though it hurt, it brought peace. I've since removed all reminders of her from my life. Her photos are gone from my phone and my walls. The baby items we'd bought together, tiny shoes, onesies, books, have all been returned or donated to a local pregnancy resource center. The room that was supposed to become a nursery is now my home office again, just like I'd originally planned. People sometimes ask if I regret how I handled it, if maybe I should have been more forgiving, more willing to work through the betrayal. But I know I made the right choice. Trust, once shattered this completely, can't be rebuilt by pretending it never broke. Some things are meant to stay broken so new things can grow in their place. First, I wanted revenge. I wanted her to feel the same pain she'd caused me. But over time, that desire faded. The real revenge turned out to be something far more meaningful. The fact that I stood up for myself. That I demanded honesty. That I refused to accept lies as the price of love. I've learned something invaluable. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away. Leave behind the people who don't value you enough to tell you the truth. Now, as I sit in my home office, the same room that might have held a crib and a rocking chair, I'm working on projects that actually matter to me. The woman I'm dating is coming over tonight, and we're cooking dinner together. My life feels real again, feels mine. That chaotic family dinner, the night her mother screamed those devastating words, was supposed to ruin everything. Instead, it became the turning point, the moment that set me on the path to something better. Sometimes the truth bursts out in the ugliest possible way, but even then, it's still the truth. And sometimes the worst nights of your life end up leading to the best outcomes. I never found out if she told the real father that her mother's outburst was what started it all. But I kind of hope she did, because that would mean her mother has to live knowing that her own moment of brutal honesty, meant to wound, ended up saving me instead. And honestly, that's justice enough. Goodbye.